good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is the current wave of military coups that have sprung up all across Africa, especially within the Francophone African countries. And this has led to some people calling it the Francophone Spring, in relation to the Arab Spring that happened about 10 years ago in Syria, Egypt, Tunisia, and so on and so forth. But fellas, let's pump the brakes on this one here. Because if you look at the Arab Spring started off pretty well, very good, thinking that it was going to change the democratic system, the dictatorships in the Middle East and Northern Africa. But unfortunately, the Arab Spring ended up being one of the worst revolutions in this modern era. I mean, you can look at these Arab countries today. Egypt headed by Sisi. Is he a democratic elected president? No. Look at Tunisia. Look at the president of Tunisia. He's also a tyrant. Now using the black Africans who are migrating through Tunisia to Europe as pawns in his country, thereby creating divisions and racial stereotyping between his fair-skinned Arabs and the black Africans. And then you look at what happened in Libya. So I'm not going to equate this revolution or coups going on in West Africa with the Arab Spring. And I hope it doesn't become like the Arab Spring. Period. As much as I don't like military coups, I'm a strong believer in democratic systems and democratic governments. I'm strongly, 100% democratic system person, period. But there comes a time also that revolutions can also be good for countries. A case in point is the American Revolution that led to the Americans' independence, as well as America's Civil War. That also led to what became the freeing of slaves and all that stuff, even though technically it didn't really free slaves. And then you look at the French Revolution, then you look at the Spanish Revolution, and so on and so forth. So there have been good revolutions. And out of these revolutions in America and Europe, they are all a testament to how great these revolutions have been for these countries like America, France, and so on and so forth. So there comes a time that if it takes revolutions to bring about great democratic systems within any country, then it's a good thing. Then so be it. As much as I don't like military coups, if this will lead Africa to have real good democracies, then so be it. But I did a segment about 2 weeks ago, and I talked about why these military coups are being embraced by these various African citizens. And the main underlying factor was corruption. That was the key driver of these military coups in these various African countries. Because at the end of the day, because these governments are very corrupt, these politicians loot their country's resources, share it among their friends and their families. They are not able to use the wealth of their countries to develop their countries so that their citizens will benefit from the wealth of their various African countries. And this intent lead them into what? Impoverished lifestyle in their various African countries. So when they hear these military coups, they embrace them because their lives have not been better under these so-called electoral democracies. But the current military coup that took place last week in Gabon is a clear testament. It's a clear testament as to why these citizens have to embrace military coups. I mean, when this guy was overthrown, there come videos that surfaced online, social media, with some of these guys, Ali Bongo's children or son-in-law, as well as a business friend, a Korean, with money stashed in suitcases, millions of dollars as well as CFA fund, stashed in suitcases. I mean, come on. I mean, if you see that your government, your leader, and their friends and their crony politicians and businessmen stealing your wealth, the wealth of a country that is supposed to be used to develop the country, so that every citizen of that country benefits from the natural resources of that wealth of that country. I mean, if you see that, as is being shown on social media, then what do you expect these citizens of these countries to do? I mean, so now if you look at all of across Africa, most of the citizens of Africa now know. I mean, it's been there. It's been known that most of their politicians are corrupt anyway. But at the end of the day, you're looking at it right now and you're seeing it on social media, how much money and how much is being stolen from their various African countries by these their elite politicians and their crony capitalist friends and families and so on and so forth. I mean, this Ali Bongo family is said to have properties in Paris worth in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, come on, fellas. I mean, Gabon is a small African country. Small African country with oil wealth. Oil wealth. But look at the population and look at the poverty level in that country. A country like Gabon should not have its citizens not being able to have 3 square meals of food a day, as well as basic human amenities. Basic human amenities should be there for these people because of the wealth of this small country, Gabon. But because of the thievery, because of the corruption, because of the evilness, the wickedness of Bongo family. I mean, the family has been in power for how many years? 54 years, fellows. His father was in power, then he succeeded his father. Ali Bongo succeeded his father, Omar Bongo. So basically, this family have been ruling this country ever since they became independent from France. You see, this is why I always talk about the kind of democracy that we have in Africa that people have to be wary of. You see, Ali Bongo and Omar Bongo, his father, became leader of France, of Gabon, right after independence. Now, this family have ruled Gabon all these years, 54 good years. 54 good years. When this coup happened, basically this coup happened, according to the news report, was based on the fact that the elections was rigged by the Bongo family. So that is why the coup took place, because of rigged election. But this family has been in power for 54 years. So 54 years, they were having an election, and same two family has been in power for all that time. Fellas, that tells you something is wrong with the system there. I mean, there's no way you can have a genuine election to have one family to be in power for 54 years, period. So that tells you. But the question is, the so-called France, their former colonial power, France, released a statement talking about they have to transition to democracy and they don't believe in the coup and all that stuff. And that's what they're going to say. But because France have been an ally to Bongo family, they have turned a blind eye to all the corruption, all the wealth that have been deprived of these Gabon citizens. As far as, like I said in my other segments, the democracies that we are practicing in Africa is not democracy. You see, all our democracy is about satisfying the West. As far as the West pick and chooses our leaders and call them democratically elected leaders, and they satisfy what the West wants from them, the West will always sanction their governments as good governments. And that is a clear example of what Gabon is. But right after the coup and looking at what is going on in Gabon right now, people jubilating in the streets, hugging these military soldiers and all that stuff. You know, I mean, I believe in democratic systems. I believe in people going to elect their leaders. But as far as we have bad governance, high level of corruption, dictatorships disguised. I mean, you talk about electoral democracies disguised as real democracies, dictatorships disguised as electoral democracies. We're going to have this problem of military coups. And from what I'm hearing, especially with regards to what happened in Burkina Faso, the Burkina Faso coup, and from what I'm hearing from these leaders there, is something that I'm not going to say that it's going to turn out to be good because I'm very wary of revolutions. I'm very wary of military coups because they come up all the time with promises, but you don't know what is going to come out of it until the reality sets in. But so far, the statements coming from Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and so on and so forth are in the right direction. So hopefully, it stays like this. But at the end of the day, I don't know if the Central African Republic, community have a system like the ECOWAS. And I don't know if they are also going to threaten these military coup leaders of Gabon to invade Gabon or not. But I hope they are not going to do that, in the sense that it will even be a shame to see what is going on social media with regards to all this money that has been stolen by Bongo family and friends, stashed in suitcases. And then how in the world can you defend? How in the world can you go on TV and defend a government like this? But I wouldn't be surprised either, because most of these people are shameless. Because at the end of the day, almost all of these African leaders are corrupt themselves. So what is happening in Gabon in terms of the level of corruption with Bongo family is not that different from what is going on in their own various African countries. But they are corrupt. They sing the same tune with Bongo, Omar Bongo. So, I mean, and yesterday or so, you had a press release coming from Equatorial Guinea, where the leader, Teodoro Obiang, now his son, who is the vice president, is head of security. I mean, this dude has been in office for how many years, Obiang? And now he is grooming his son to take over. I mean, come on, fellas. I mean, are these what we call democracies? These are not democracies. We all know these are fraud. These are fake democracies. These are dictatorships disguised in electoral democracies. So basically, when this Obiang guy leaves office, his son will have to take over. Same happened with Togo. Yadema. And look at him today. Is he a democratic elected leader? No. And then you talk about Cameroon. Paul Biya. That guy has been in office for how many years now? I mean, that guy even doesn't know what the heck he's been reading lately. I think he doesn't even know his environment. And he apparently also grooming his son. So I was very disappointed. And I talked about it in my last segment when these ECOWAS leaders were talking about going to Niger to restore democracy. When they know definitely that most of these African countries are not democratic. But I said it also in that segment that they were saying that because they were doing that to protect their own governments. Because if you look at these very simple examples that I've given in terms of Gabon, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, that tells you clearly that we don't have democracies in most of these African countries. These are all dictatorships disguised in the name of electoral democracies. But there's one thing that I'm also very worried about. When I saw footage on the news media with regards to people talking about some of these military leaders aligning with Russia or China against the West and so on and so forth. You know, fellas, I'm a staunch capitalist. I'm a staunch 100% capitalist, period. I believe in free trade. I believe in capitalism, 100%. But I don't believe in having alliances based on economic systems. Because right now, if you look at what is coming out of these news media with regards to these countries, talking about whether they are going to align with Russia and China and so on and so forth, it doesn't have to be. African countries have to stay independent. African countries have to be non-aligned. They don't have to align with no country. Even they have to work with France if they have to work with France. At the end of the day, they have to be equals at the table. That is all it has to be. That's the bottom line. I mean, we have to do business with any country as far as we go there as equals. And we make sure that that transaction benefits our fellow citizens of various African countries. That's simple. It's that simple. So I don't believe in allying with Russia or China against America and all that stuff. No. Trade with America if you have to trade with America. Trade with France if you have to trade with France. Trade with China if you have to trade with China. Trade with Russia if you have to trade with Russia. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that that business deal, that trading deal that is going to take place, have to benefit our citizens, period. That is all it is. Because at the end of the day, we need development. And if we want to build real democracies, then we have to be open to trade with any country, as far as we make sure that whatever deals that are being made benefits the citizens of our various African countries. So I'm a staunch believer in dealing with any country, period. It doesn't have to be Russia and China against America and the West. I'm sorry. Because at the end of the day, a lot of good things will help Africans develop better come from the West, will come from the West. So it's all about having equality at the table and making sure that the deals that you sign benefit your various African citizens. Because right now, if you look at most African countries and you look at some of the deals that they have even signed with China, a case in point is Zambia. Look at the bad deal they signed with China. Now I think their airport is going to be controlled by China, and they already have one of their departments already under the control of China already, because of a bad deal by the corrupt government. You see, at the end of the day, all this boils down to corruption. See, because these various African countries have corrupt leaders, have thieves as their leaders, they don't seek to do any good deal in the interest of their fellow African citizens. Because all the deals that they do it to benefit themselves, what they can get for themselves and their crony capitalist friends and their families. So out of that, they don't seek to look for the interest of their various African citizens. And that is the problem. And that is what has also contributed to these coups. So I pray that these coup leaders, especially looking at the one in Burkina Faso, with a statement coming out of Burkina Faso and so on and so forth, I hope they will look at this whole system and then deal with it to benefit the interest of Burkina Faso, as well as those in Niger, to benefit the interest of Niger, or as well as those in Mali. At the end of the day, it has to be about benefiting your citizens. And one key thing about this coup or revolution that is going on in Africa is about leadership. Fellows, for you to be able to bring transformational changes to any country or any system, it has to have good leadership. And that leadership has to lead by example. That is the key. Has to lead by example. So if these people really want to bring changes, real democratic changes to their various African countries, then they have to lead by example. And one key area is to set up this anti-corruption system in their various African countries. For the citizens of their various African countries to believe that they mean business, they have to set example by declaring their own assets first, and then declare their assets when they are leaving office. For the citizens to believe that they were true leaders. Because you can never build a genuine democratic system that your citizens of your various African countries will follow or tag along if you don't show leadership. They have to see that leadership coming from you. I mean, it also goes with the expenses. I mean, not just lavish spending on V8 vehicles, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars buying vehicles, whilst majority of your citizens are poor. And then you riding in air-conditioned V8s. Minister has a V8, deputy minister has a V8, the bureaucracies, accountant has a V8. No, fellas, you have to lead by example. You have to cut all that crap out. And if your citizens see that you are leading by cutting that crap out, leading by example, leading within your means, just like they are doing in their various homes, they will follow your lead. And they will tag along and they will build this revolution together with you guys. And this revolution will become very successful. And that's the only way that you can build a successful revolution. The people have to believe in it. And the people will only believe in a revolution if they believe that the leadership is leading by example. So that is key. And now, fellas, also, one key area that African governments have to look at is agriculture. Agriculture should be the number one key area of every African government's investment for the next 20 years. Every African country should have a developmental plan of mechanized industrial agriculture system. Period. Because agriculture is the key to Africa's socio-economic development. And I hope these new leaders coming in will focus, invest in that sector. I mean, we talk about mechanized agriculture. We call it mechanized farming, where vast, huge lands will be allocated to businesses with the government, like cooperatives, to help build the agriculture industry of every African country. Because at the end of the day, if you can create food so that every poor citizen in your various African countries can have 3 square meals a day without having to spend tons of money, you would have achieved more than building glass houses when the people are still hungry on the streets in your various African countries, fellas. So, with all said about all these things, at the end of the day, I don't know how these revolutions are going to end up. But I'm hoping that they end up good. And they end up in a way where most African countries will also emulate. Because at the end of the day, also, you have to look at it this way. What is happening in most of these African countries is happening because when people see certain things going on with their neighbors, and they see the good things coming out of it, then there will be the edge for them to work, force their government also to change their ways. So this revolution is going on definitely is going to have impact on other various African countries as well. So these various corrupt African governments, you have to learn from these coups that are taking place in your various neighborhoods. Because it's coming. If you don't change your ways, your citizens will also be on the street jubilating and calling for military coups because they are tired. They are tired of the corruption. They are tired of the suffering. They are tired of your luxury at their expense. So, fellas, if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Peace and love.